time. I'm going to turn this over to Aaron McDonald.
Hi,
Aaron?
Thank you, Michael. Hi, I'm Aaron McDonald. I'm an assistant professor in strategic management at California State University, San Marcos. As Michael mentioned, we are a little over time, so I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Professor Zoubeir lafhaj. Please take it away, Zoubeir.
Hi, I am ready. I hope that you are hearing me.
Great,
Hi.
yes.
Yes,
Can I upload my presentation?
please.
Thank you.
Great, we see it.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for this invitation, and I am very delighted to be with you to share some knowledge, some skills, and to share with you the field that I am monitoring here in Central Lille. So the purpose of my presentation will be the construction additive 3D printing, in fact, construction additive manufacturing and lean construction, and the status and opportunities for a better impact. So my name is Zoubeir lafhaj. I'm full professor in Central Lille, which is elite university in France. I don't like to say that, but it is one of the sister of écoles centrales in France. We have 5 écoles centrales in France, and are located in the north of France in Lille. I have been the Dean of International Affairs of Central Lille. I am chairholder in Construction 4.0, which is kind of public-private partnership located in Central Lille, focusing on the construction of the future. And I am also the founder and president of the Lean Construction France Institute, which is gathering public, private, big companies, small companies, where the focus is mainly in how lean construction could enhance the collaboration and to reduce wastes in this field of construction, and many other positions which is not have time to explain today. The summary of my presentation is dealing with Industry 4.0, which is the strategy of the strategy of Germany. From this Industry 4.0, I will focus only on 3D printing and on lean in order to see what is the link and how my vision is in this link. So what does it mean Industry 4.0? So there is a 4 industrial revolution. The 4.0 means 4 revolution. The first Industry 1.0 was between 1765 to 1845, where the beginning of the first industrial revolution, where it is linked also to discover the coal. The second industrial revolution is between 1870 to 1930, mainly known as the area of the Fordism, where Ford main focus on the industry of cars and so on, and even in the business. But it is linked also to the discovering of electricity, which is linked to the energy. The third one is 1980 to 2000, and we're focusing on electronics and automation and robotization. And now we are in the 4th industrial revolution, which is we are living in it, which is linked to artificial intelligence, cloud, and IoT, and so on. So all the countries in the world have a policy, have a strategy, and each one have a name of the strategy. Germany, the name of the strategy is Industry 4.0, very simple. French, the name of the revolution, the name of the equivalent of the German one is l'industrie du futur, which means the industry of the future. And China, the name is the Silk Road. It is the strategy of China. Japan, the name of their strategy is Society 5.0, and this is very important. So in fact, there is no Industry 5.0 because it is linked to industrial revolution, and some papers and some documents we find that. So I'm somehow a little bit disturbed by that. So I would like to, as academic, to focus on that there is only 4 industrial revolution until now, and the strategy depends on the status of the country, the willing that what we would like that to do in the future, but in the same time they have to inspire from their history and from their culture too. Here, the beginning of the preparation of the industry 4.0 in France was in 2015, and we call it the industry du futur. There is 9 technology for that. The 9 technology inspired the industry 4.0 or the industry du futur are, as you see here, cybersecurity, the cloud, additive manufacturing, reality, augmented reality, big data, and IoT, and so on, that we can see them here in the slide. The difference, in my opinion, from France and Germany for the strategy is linked that the French are not based only on technology, linked to the history, linked to the culture of France, and more than the technology in France, there is 2 things that we are focusing on it. The first one is the environment, and the second one is the social. So there is the technology with the first umbrella is environment and energy, and the second umbrella is the sociology and the social impact of any introducing of technology. It is why I am presenting today only 3D printing, which is technology, in fact, one of the technology or one of the 9 technology, which is called here in additive manufacturing, and the social, what I represent here in my presentation about lean construction. Here we can see here the vision. Wilmart in 1910 was a very visionary architect, and he gave his view about architect. And can we see here the architect, how can he imagine the world in 2000? And here some robotization, some mechanization, and this is really very interesting to know that there is a lot of people, architect, engineer, it usually are focusing what the future can be. So one of the success story in the 3D printing is, without doubt, is Winson, which is a very big 3D printing company in China, one of the leader in 3D printing in construction, and making even some agreement with Dubai, with international action with Dubai, and this is something that I would like to give as perhaps as example. This is my vision of the construction site in the future. It is my work, it is my vision, which is, I have another time perhaps to explain it. This vision is based in that in 2049, I think that will have a recycling factory, training center, 3D printing, drone platforms, maintenance center, autonomous vehicle, modular construction, and mobile control tower, which is, I think, very important. For me, in the future, we have a city and we have only one construction site, which is monitored as we monitor now planes and the airports. So here you can here see some places that we can focus on it. So perhaps another time I would like to focus on what does it mean, my vision. I wrote for that a book, especially for my vision. Technology usage across to life cycle of a project. You can see the origin, the planning, the design, the construction, and the operation. And you can see here that 3D printing we are in the construction phase. In this phase, you can see here example of drones, monitoring and simulation. And this gives us the idea that we are progressing in this field. This is the map mount of what is done now in 3D printing in the world. So we can see here there is a lot of works in USA, mainly with André Rodenko in Minnesota, with NASA, with MIT a little bit, mainly Berkeley, and for sure the leader for 3D printing in USA and even in the world is Contour Crafting from the University of South California. We can see that there is a lot of work in Europe, but a lot of work also in China. And we can see here that from USA, André Rodenko worked in USA, but also he worked in Philippines, which is very, very clever from his side. Winson from China worked in China, but he worked in Africa and he worked in Middle East too. So the vision for this 3D company now are really international vision in the beginning of preparing their company. In Europe, we have a lot of work in Europe. but not so famous as we can see in China or in mainly in Asia and in USA. So we have here mainly a lot of company in Netherlands. One of the interesting work is done in Luiz University with a kind of agreement with Skanska in Sweden, and a lot of work in Italy also and Spain. What we can see here that the beginning of this kind of company dealing with the 3D printing and construction are now for the agreement. They are not only national. So, okay, as example, French company are not building their strategy only with French stakeholder. They can do it with the Chinese, or they can do it with English, and they can do it with the Sweden. This is really global vision of 3D printing that we would like to focus. What are the 10 principles of 3D printing in construction or in any field? There is an input data, there is conversion process, and there is output data. The 10 principles for the input data and limited design. So thanks to 3D printing, this is a new technology, there is now unlimited design. So for the architect really, or for the engineer, there is a kind of freedom which is incredible to design anything that you want, because there is no problem with the technology. Infinite range of materials, so we can combine the materials. Conversion process, there is complexity is free. So designing 3 pieces linked to each other in the first way, we can do it. Technology is not a problem. Compacted and portable production, precise replication, the variety is free also, and there is no need for skills. So we can put a new 3D printing company, and we can hire some employees, and they can do it without any problem. This is something interesting for this new technology. Now assembly required and less waste per production. And this less waste is really important, because for me, the fact that now we are speaking a lot about 3D printing, it is not abnormal. It is linked to the fact that we have a lot of waste. So in the beginning, when I am working on that, I linked 3D printing to the waste. So 3D printing is interesting if we use the wasted material, in fact. This is me, some experience in 3D printing. And we are working on designing a new formulation of concrete printing. But the concrete that we would like to produce is zero carbon materials. This is really something important. We focus in Centralile in my team only on 3D printing, innovative process technology, but for the materials, zero carbon. And we have a lot of work with a lot of partners. We discuss with a lot of company. We work with Bouygues Construction, which is one of the biggest company in France, in Europe, and even in the world. We have a lot of projects. What is our specificity on working on 3D printing? That we work on 3D printing, but for sustainable materials. So this is something interesting. So the materials must be sustainable. The building that we will build must be sustainable, and we have a lot of knowledge for that. Thanks to our experience, because we are working in France and in my lab, some colleagues are working on the sustainability of the materials that will be used for the storage of nuclear waste. So this is something interesting. The skills that we got from that, from the sustainability of the materials, the need is that we need zero carbon materials, and the 3D printing materials is really technology. So we combine all that, and we focus on to prepare our future. Here is some standard sample formulation to speak about the sustainability indicator, which are general sustainability, specific sustainability, specification of indicator, and basic future. This is some equipment that we have, really incredible equipment to prepare ourselves for the sustainability of these materials, and a lot of young people, bachelor student, master student from Centralile, and mainly international student working on that. So this is something that the young students are very interested by, this new technology, and this has inspired us a lot for construction, which before are not very interesting for the bright students, because there is now competence, now skills, so now it is really the opposite. The fields of construction attract a lot of the best students, because there is a new technology, 3D printing, IoT, and artificial intelligence in construction. Here are some examples that we print in Centralile with many best students. Here we have we print with mortar, we print with clay, we print with concrete, we print with the new materials, as they said, and we print with our colleagues from Mood. We can print with also with drones, as you see here with these kind of drones. So the printing is not only done by robots, by drones also. This is really original. Why I have to speak about 3D printing, lean construction, and business models? Because for me it is very important that the technology you have to be linked to our organization system and to the waste, and we have to think about in the same time in the beginning of the new business model that we have to put. This is the complexity needed to prepare the future, and we have for that some skills, some method to resolve with, especially for the complex project or the complex problems. Some workshops done since many years for that. What does it mean lean now? I spoke about 3D printing. What does it mean lean? Lean, it is, as you can see, the conventional thing is versus lean is you have time, quality, and cost, and lean is really the very center of that. So this is very important. It is not the time which is important, it is not the quality, it is not the cost. So really, lean is the very center of the three. The principle of lean are the CAT-P, 4P, model by linker, philosophy, process is very important, and people and partner and problem solving. Lean principle by Womack and Jones explain that we have to identify value. Map value streaming is a kind of tool that we can really use to go further, create the flow, establishing the pool and the continuous movement. I would like to speak about also something that for me it is very important. We speak usually about the 3R, reduce, reuse, and recycle. But there is a new scientific article which was published in Nature in 2021, which I really think it put something new, which is the 4th R, which we use more retrench, which means that in our mind, in our how we are trained, how since many years, we are usually trained to add something, to add a new law, to add a new regulation. So we don't think to retrench something. And this scientific study was done on a lot of young children, and the children, because they are not obliged to think as us, and they are not disturbed by the training, they retrench something when it is not needed. So this is really something important that I would like to focus here today, that we have to think, we have to deconstruct how we think before, in order that when we have a problem, when we would like to do something better, we have not only to reduce or to reuse or to recycle, but to retrench things. This is very important. This action put more value for the new steps. The concept of collaboration is for me more important than the concept of reducing the waste. Because reducing the waste is really something now admitted by all the people, but the collaboration is really something different. It's something we think that we have some friends and we can collaborate. We would like to win money and we can collaborate. It is not true. In order to collaborate, there is a lot of scientific method for collaboration, and this is really important for the company, for the teams, for even for the society. The skills of collaboration are more important than waste, because this is really, I focus on that. What does it mean, a linear economy, that you know that all of us? So it is linear, so it means that we have a lot of wastes. What we call circular economy also, this is a new field that we have to think on deconstruction, on demolition before any construction, and we think about recycling, reuse materials, things like that, or sharing energy. So lean and 3D printing, for me, lean is important for collaboration and for waste. 3D printing is really important as a new technology, which reduce wastes and which enhance and increase collaboration and efficacy, and reducing penalty of the worker, reducing a problem of quality, reducing a problem of safety also. This is really something that I think very important in the future. We have not to perform on technology, but on investments in the human capacity. You can see here the traditional construction before, and the new in integration of 3D printing in the future. And I think that the new model of 3D printing in construction will be, this is one that we can see on my right. Example of lean waste is...
Zoubeir, we are winding down on time. If you can wrap up in the next minute, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm finishing. This is my five books that I published. The first one was lean construction. The second one is blockchain in construction. The third one is what does it mean logistics in construction? My vision of the future of the construction site and for the city, and the woman in construction, which I think it is a really field that we have to focus in. Thank you so much for your listening and for your interesting and ready to answer any question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Zoubeir. That was incredibly interesting. I'm blown away by the advancements in 3D printing and how you're able to actually apply these on that scale and durability. Very, very fascinating. Unfortunately, we are out of time for questions. Our next speaker, Anna, has a hard deadline, so we're going to move on to her. But thank you. And there is a roundtable coming up in about an hour or so that we can chat further on. So thank you, Zoubeir and Anna. Please, Anna Rubin is our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Rubin.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. All right, everybody can see we're all good? Yes, I assume no news is good news. So thank you very much. My name is Anna Rubin. I work for the Organization for Economic and Cooperation and Development, and I just want to thank the conference organizers for inviting me to speak at this event. So before I get into the content of my presentation, I just want to give a brief overview of what the OECD is for those of you who are not familiar with it. We are a multilateral organization based in Paris. We were initially created about 60 years ago to administer the Marshall Plan and support the economic rebuilding of Europe post-World War II. But since that time, we've really evolved to be a platform to support our member countries and partner countries in creating better policies for better lives. That's really our tagline. So we're a secretariat of about 3,000 people, and we basically cover any policy area that a national government covers, from education to health to innovation to the environment. And we work in a number of ways. So first, we provide a platform for peer exchange and policymakers. So we have about 300 different committees, expert groups, and working groups that bring together senior policymakers and experts on specific topics. We also develop internationally comparable statistics, so that we can help our member countries kind of benchmark where they are compared to their peers. So the one that most people are familiar with is our PISA study that looks at how 15-year-olds around the world kind of score on key competences compared to each other. A third pillar of work is also developing global standards to help the international community address common challenges, for example, in relation to climate change or international taxation. And on this slide, you can see the map of our member countries. So we have about 38 member countries, mostly based in Europe, North America, and Asia Pacific, and some in Latin America, but we also engage more broadly through our global relations and outreach. But I just wanted to flag our member countries for the purposes of this presentation, because when I present data, it's for OECD member countries, so it doesn't necessarily apply in the same way to the rest of the world. Within the OECD, I specifically work for a program called the Local Employment and Economic Development Program, so the LEAD program, a little bit different than what we think about when we say LEAD in terms of construction, but that's the acronym that we have. And this program was created about 40 years ago during another jobs crisis. And it was created because national governments realized that one-size-fits-all policies that were designed at the national level were not doing enough to address job challenges and entrenched disadvantage in different types of communities. So they created the LEAD program as a platform for international exchange, both to understand how can you better tailor national policies to different local communities, and how also can you lift up some of these local innovations that emerge within different cities and regions. So our guiding mantra is really creating good jobs in great places, and we look at the contributions of a number of different policy areas. We look at employment and skills policies, social inclusion policies, what we call the social economy or social enterprises and social innovation. We also look at entrepreneurship and small business policies, as well as some core local and community development policies. We also take a deep dive on specific sectors. In the past couple of years, we've looked, for example, specifically at how culture and creative sectors can contribute to local growth and well-being. So our main constituents is national governments. We have a directing committee made up of delegates of our different member countries that kind of steer our overall work, but we also work directly with local and regional stakeholders. And the main way that we do that is through what we call our local development forum. So this is a community of thousands of local development practitioners around the world. And for us, it's really a way to bring the OECD to local communities, for example, through our in-person and virtual events, kind of curating the best of or the most relevant OECD research for people working in city governments, in education institutes, and universities who are interested in local development. But it's also a way for us to bring local voices to the OECD. So it's kind of our reality check. Are we working on the right topics? Do our policy recommendations make sense to the people who are actually going to have to implement them? And it's also a platform for international peer exchange across local stakeholders. So of course, we engage with public sector stakeholders, but we also bring in chambers of commerce, social economy organizations, local entrepreneurs, with the ideas that there's kind of, it's more than the sum of its parts, right? When you bring these different perspectives together for a conversation, often you end up with insights, ideas that you won't necessarily get when it's just public actors sitting around the table together. And if you want to kind of get a sense of a flavor of our work, I encourage you to check out our new Places web portal, which stands for providing local actors with case studies, evidence, and solutions. And through this web portal, we've kind of created a searchable database of some of our best practice examples and case studies. And I can add a link to the chat at the end of my presentation. So I know that's a lot of kind of institutional intro, but I think it's helpful for people to kind of understand the perspective that I'm coming at with this, because I know it's a little bit different than the other speakers. But now I'm going to get into the kind of substance of the work that I think is more relevant. So last year, our lead directing committee, our official governing body, and our local development forum met in Cork, Ireland to celebrate the 40th anniversary of our program. And this was really an opportunity for us to kind of reflect on what we've learned over 40 years of LEAD's work and how that might need to be adapted, looking 40 years into the future. And so we came up with what we call the Cork Action Plan, imagining local futures, and that S in brackets is, by design, because we don't know that there's a single future or that communities may be taking different paths to different futures. And it's about preparing for the jobs and skills of tomorrow. So first, a quick snapshot of what we at the OECD see as some of the kind of bigger picture changes that are expecting local development. So the first, and I think this is not surprising, is that we see that shocks and transitions are the new reality. It's not an exception, right? So within the OECD, we tend to talk about 3 megatrends reshaping our economies and societies. We talk about demographic change. In OECD context, at least, this is really about kind of populations aging, and in many communities, population shrinking. So for example, in OECD countries, we see that over the past 20 years, about 1 in 5 cities have actually lost population. So that really means you have to kind of rethink your local development strategies. The other big megatrend we talk about is the green transition, and then of course, digitalization, automation, and AI. But it's not just about the transitions that we can more or less predict. It's also about understanding that we need to be better prepared to respond to unexpected shocks in the future. So, COVID, the war in Ukraine, we're understanding whether it's climate change, we understand these shocks are going to be coming kind of more and more frequently. The second big picture item is that when we look at the traditional recipe for local development, we tend to think in terms of economic factors, R&D spending, the business environment, human capital, and hard infrastructure. But increasingly, academics and policymakers are realizing that what we call kind of soft infrastructure also matters. So these are the local individuals and institutions that play a leadership role. It's the local partnerships that allow a community to kind of come together when a shock hits and deliver on a shared vision for what the future may look like. These are a little bit harder to quantify in our models, but we know that they matter, and we're seeing it kind of appear more and more in how policymakers are approaching these local development questions. And then the final big picture item is that we see that kind of long-term resilience may require what we're calling a change in the game. I think we talked a lot about economic resilience post the 2008 crisis, but we see this idea of resilience really coming back into the conversation in a more comprehensive way, whether we're thinking about supply chain resilience in strategic sectors or resilience to climate change. And I think we have to recognize that moving to a resilience-based model may require some hard trade-offs. So for example, it may mean investing in redundancies that may actually be less economic efficient in the short term. So it does actually require kind of a rethinking of how we think about kind of local development and growth. So what we've done in this Cork action plan is kind of take this big picture thinking, reflect on all the work that we've done, and come up with kind of 4 pillars to guide the future of kind of jobs and skills and local development policies. So I'm going to go briefly through each of these and try and highlight some OECD data and examples to illustrate what we mean. The first bucket is about ramping up local skill systems to help people, firms, and communities keep pace with these megatrends that I just spoke about. So, for example, if you look at the green transition, the latest OECD data shows that about 18% of workers in the OECD have what we call green task jobs. And these are jobs where 10% or more of the tasks contribute to sustainable development. If we look at a decade ago, this share was about 16%. So we haven't seen a huge amount of change, just 2 percentage points in 10 years. But we do expect that this kind of the share of green task jobs is going to pick up pace. So for example, when we look at recent data on online job postings, we see that demand for green task jobs has outpaced labor demand overall. In this work, it's also important to flag that we also see some important divides in green task jobs. So we see important geographic divides, for example. Capital regions in most OECD countries tend to have the highest share of green task jobs. So when we think about kind of greening our economies, there's a risk that this could kind of further exacerbate increased existing regional divides. So then the question is, what can we do about it? So we have kind of 4 bullet points here. And the first is really about linking local skills strategies better with local economic development strategies. And this has to be done in collaboration with the private sector. So for example, last week, we organized a workshop on investments in battery plant gigafactories. So we all see these investments it's every week, there's a new headline about a new major investment. But what we heard from the investment community is that there's really a risk that skills and labor shortages could be a bottleneck to successfully delivering on these investments. We also heard from 2 best practice examples, one from Nord-France and one from Michigan in the United States, where they're really ramping up skill systems in response to these big needs. So for example, Nord-France has developed a new battery training center right next door to a new gigafactory. And in Michigan, they're actually developing a new curriculum on battery plant workers that's going to be shared across its whole community college system, which is really an innovation for the community colleges to be working together in that way. Other priorities in this pillar include making skill systems more responsive and agile. For example, better using real-time monitoring of local labor market conditions and skills to manage to change training provision locally. There's also another recommendation about expanding participation in lifelong learning across the skill spectrum. I think this is especially relevant when we think about population aging in OECD countries. So education is training, that's not something you do once in your life and then you're done. It's something we need to be increasingly thinking about as something that comes across the life cycle. And then we're also big advocates of leveraging new tools for the design and delivery of skills and training, such as digital delivery, non-degree or micro-credentials, or module learning. The second priority within this Cork action plan is about building local business environments that are resilient to both these short-term shocks and longer-term transitions. So for example, this chart looks at the results of a survey of small and medium-sized businesses in 33 OECD countries. And it really makes it hit home the high share of supply chain interruptions that small businesses faced in 2021. For example, in the wholesale and retail sector and manufacturing, close to 2/3 of small businesses reported facing some kind of supply chain interruptions. And you may be wondering why we put the local business environment here. So of course, the national business environment really matters, but we really think, especially for small businesses, it's that local business environment that can really make the difference. So for example, across OECD countries, we see that the number of new firms per capita is 1.5 times higher in capital regions than the rest of their respective countries. And I think this is an indication of that local business environment question. So what concretely can policymakers do about this? So the first is about developing local ecosystems that support the incubation and scaling up of SMEs and entrepreneurs. This audience knows this really well. I'm not telling you anything new. But we really put a focus on including traditionally underrepresented groups in these programs. So whether it's youth, women, immigrants, older workers, people with disabilities. So data from the OECD series on missing entrepreneurs shows that there would be an additional 34 million with an M, early stage entrepreneurs in the OECD area if everyone is as active in entrepreneurship as 30 to 49-year-old men. So that's why we call them these missing entrepreneurs. It's kind of a missed resource for our economies and our societies. And if we look at women, for example, even once women kind of start up businesses, on average, they're less prepared to kind of scale these businesses and grow. And we see a lot of examples of how governments can support this kind of scaling up. So not just the initial startup, but that scale up question. For example, in Canada, there's the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, which is a great example of a public-private collaboration that I think reaches, hundreds of thousands of women entrepreneurs every year. Other strategies within this pillar include kind of thinking about this balance you want between, I call them kind of homegrown businesses, so your local businesses that are kind of started up by local entrepreneurs, and bringing in international investments in the community. I know the big FDI announcements are kind of the sexy things that grab headlines, but I think your economic development strategy can't just be about that. We also really encourage people to assess the health of their local economy and business environment using a kind of broader suite of measures than kind of the traditional economic indicators. So for example, you may see a relatively low unemployment rate and think, great, we're doing really well, but that can actually hide kind of a high share of low quality or poorly productive jobs that may be kind of dragging down your economy over the long term. Or for example, we've talked to communities that have experienced layoffs, after the major employer closed, and they said, actually, we should have seen this coming because we saw entrepreneurship rates in our community kind of declining. So we became more and more reliant on a single employer. And when that shock hit, it really hit us hard. The next pillar we have is about revisiting local employment and job creation policies to be better fit for the future of work. And there's a lot tied up in the future of work. We heard about 3D printing earlier. We could spend a whole, 3 days on this question, but I want to focus here on the question of remote working. And I think there's this question of how well adapted are local development strategies for the future of remote work. So looking at data from Europe, for example, we can see that the share of respondents who sometimes work remotely, it peaked during COVID and then it kind of leveled off in 2022. But the share of people who mainly work remotely effectively doubled between 2019 and 2022. And what we see across our OECD countries and more local communities are thinking about this question of remote and teleworking as kind of a core part of their local economic development strategies. So for example, in Trento, Italy, they've actually developed a kind of remote working strategy to think about this as kind of a whole question. In Ireland, we saw a great example last year of the Ludgate Hub, which is in a small town in West Cork, Ireland, of about 2,700 people. And they really leveraged their high-speed internet connection to try and create a kind of a co-working space that attracts businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, and kind of remote workers from major multinational corporations. Other suggestions in terms of kind of rethinking local employment and job creation policies for the future of work is upgrading your local employment programs, recognizing that people are going to be switching between jobs more frequently. It's not, you enter an employer, you stay there for most of your career. There's many more transitions throughout people's careers. So when we're thinking about how we support people, you have to kind of reach them before those transitions and during those transitions as well. We also talk about working with employers to focus not just on the quantity of local job creation, but also the quality of local job creation. And this goes back to that question of kind of local economic resilience. And then even in the context, where we're facing record low unemployment rates across the OECD area, we know that there's still a lot of people who just can't access the labor market. And so we're really putting a focus on better addressing the wide range of barriers that keep people out of work, for example, by integrating human-centered design strategies into employment programs. And then my last and final pillar, I see Aaron, is getting a little worried about time probably, is that we need to be leveraging a wider range of local assets to support more inclusive development. So local development is about jobs, it's about good jobs, but it's not only about jobs. It's also about well-being and creating attractive places to live and work, and if I can even say play. A broader approach to local development considers a range of factors that contribute to well-being, such as healthy environment, quality local services, social capital, access to cultural amenities, pride in place. And here I want to highlight specifically the role of the social and solidarity economy, because this has really been a pillar of LEAD's work over the past 20 years. And we see that many people think of the social economy as a kind of a band-aid to repair problems, but it's not just a band-aid. It can actually be part of your core local economic development strategy. So for example, if we look at France and the Netherlands, actually about 10% of employment overall is in the social economy. So these are not niche sectors. These are really kind of core parts of the economy. So we've identified a number of ways you can think about better leveraging these local assets. So for example, when we think about the social economy, we often cite the Mondragon Cooperative in the Basque Country in Spain as a really good example of how the social economy is an integral part of the local economic development strategy. For those of you who aren't familiar with this cooperative, it's actually kind of a federation of 95 separate self-governing cooperatives. It employs about 80,000 people. It manages 14 R&D centers. And it's really been a vital part of the kind of local economic fabric of the Basque Country for almost 70 years. Other strategies that we encourage policymakers to think about include investing in local quality of life and pride in place, thinking more broadly about the who and the what of local innovation. So it's not just technical innovation, it's also thinking about social innovation, or what role can the culture and creative sectors play in local innovation ecosystems, and how do you leverage the spillovers from those sectors to your broader economy? We also encourage people to invest in developing kind of soft local infrastructure, investing in the organizations that play a leadership role, investing in kind of developing those local partnerships that, yes, maybe the outcomes are harder to measure using, the exact number of jobs created in year one of the program, but you're really developing a kind of a local infrastructure for your economy. So I know that was a lot of information to throw at you. I'll throw some links into the chat for those of you who want to know more, and thank you for your attention. And don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or want to engage with our local development forum. We'll be meeting next year in the greater Copenhagen region. And so I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter if you might want to attend in person. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you, Anna. That was an incredibly fascinating perspective of this big transition on the technology and what it means for jobs. And I really appreciate the local perspective and strategies for that. So fantastic work, and thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much, Anne, for your participation. From today, we invite all the keynote speaker to joining our next international conference, 12 to 14 of November. Then we will see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And I believe who's next? It is Luiz Carlos Pinto. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron. Are you listening well?
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Zoubeir.
Thank you.
Can you hear me well? That's the classic question of the digital times. Aaron?
Yes. All good.
Okay. I'm just sharing the presentation now. Well, it's a pleasure to be here in this virtual conference and share a little bit of the insights that we've learned from a major project that has been the creation of a quadruple helix collaboration pact that's helping transform the city of Porto Alegre in the south of Brazil in a hotspot of innovation in Latin America. So why this is so important? Because one of the innovation megatrends that we see around is how we can foster the power of collaboration and networks. That's probably the game that we'll be playing on this 21st century. And a little bit about Porto Alegre. Porto Alegre is the capital of Rio Grande do Sul, the southernmost state in Brazil, close here to Uruguay and Argentina. It has a population of around 1.5 million inhabitants. It represents the 12th city in terms of size in Brazil, but it has some very good indicators in terms of knowledge and fuel for innovation, because it has the second highest rate of PhD ratios per capita and produces around 11% of the qualified knowledge that's published in major magazines around the world, despite having around 5 or 6% of the GDP or the population. It's a very diverse and cosmopolitan, and most of this strength that is shown on the last slide is because we have more than 50 higher education institutions and more than 100,000 graduate and undergraduate students that are based on the city. The best federal university, second best public university, it's located here, URGS, and we have 2 of the top 5 private universities in the country, PUC, do Rio Grande do Sul, and Unicinos, and a lot of a very deep pool of talent that is based on engineering, IT, and health sciences. In terms of location, Porto Alegre is the epicenter of a large region that has a lot of international companies and players like the ones that are listed here on the right. And it's in the main axis of development with clusters that are related with microelectronics and deep heavy equipment and other agrotech technologies. Economically, it has a GDP of around $116 billion. The main economic sectors are retail, health, construction, food, gastro, tech, and creative economy. And it has a percentage of around 1% of the GDP of Brazil. More than 250K businesses, are around 1,000 startups. And a very strong and healthy local innovation ecosystem with some of the most well-recognized science and technology parks in Brazil, like Tecnopuc and Tecnocinos. We would think that we have a blend of the ingredients that would be necessary to create an innovative city. But unfortunately, like many other cities, up to a few years ago, Porto Alegre was not finding its roots around the 21st century. In fact, the city was a lot worried about competitiveness, how to adapt to these new technologies, these new economic clusters that were coming, the new future bringing technologies, the loss of talent, and talent will be the main ingredient for innovative cities in the 21st century, and the idea of adapting to the digital innovation global scenario. And we were looking at some players that were already very well recognized as innovation champions around the world. Some are very different from Brazil, and it's difficult to create a parallel among Switzerland or the Silicon Valley or Shanghai. But when we go to the right of this figure and we start to see Barcelona, Lisbon, Medellin, that's one of the innovation capitals that we have here in Latin America, or Recife and Santa Catarina in Brazil, we cannot have more excuses, and we find that there must be something that we were lacking if we have all those ingredients and we couldn't click as an innovation hub in Brazil. And when we look into what was missing, it was a little bit the idea that like football teams, it's not enough to have a lot of very good players. You need to have a way of connecting these players in a system of play, so the strength of each player can be really useful for the city. So we decided that we wanted to create a common agenda, to create a collective sense, to make sure that we were working on an ecosystem kind of sense of collectiveness. And that was the idea of creating an innovation pact. The first helix that we were kind of moved, and we use it as a trigger to start the movement. Unlike many other cities where government or the private sector are the leading helix, was the academic helix. In this sense, we united the three major universities and created the idea of the Alliance for Innovation. That was a way of showing that being together is better than being isolated, and that the rule of the game would be the we and not the I. That provided us with the basis to create a major movement in the city, and here we have an important moment in July 2018, where most of the mayors, most of the private leaders, most of the academic leaders were reunited, and we talked with them about Recife, Barcelona, Santa Catarina, and the idea of creating a unique pact that would bring together private, public, academics, and social organizations to create a common agenda with the possible consensus for the city. Of course, we had a friend that had already worked successfully in some of these environments, and we invited Professor José Piqué from La Salle Tecnova in Barcelona to be the mentor of this new movement. And we designed with Piqué a whole plan to establish this new movement in the city that was supposed to harness a lot of the power and make sure that we were able to change the city into a real impactful innovation player. And the roots had a lot of important steps. The establishment of a real governance that with volunteers from the universities and the city council, the establishment of a consulting body made up of businessmen and media leaders, the hiring of the mentorship from José Piquet, the establishment of the city table. 77 of the most important institutions in the city were invited to sit down and think together about what will be necessary to change the city. And that city table now has more than 110 entities that reunite at least once every 6 months to decide what are the main targets for the city and how we will achieve them. We defined an identity that is Pacto Alegre, that was represented by the quadruple helix, by the interaction, by the bright folk colors, and by the transparency and a lot of values that we were kind of putting into the movement. And a communication squad made up of volunteers from the universities, from the city council, from some of the players, the private players, and the manifesto that brought together the idea that we were celebrating and fostering the collaborative action to improve the city. That was the made up of Pacto Alegre. Pacto Alegre is nowadays a movement that's supported by more than 100 of the most relevant institutions of the city and has hundreds of volunteers that act together to create collaborative projects to change the city. The announcement of the viability of establishing was placed on December 18, and the first meeting of the city table with the 77 leading institutions was done in the city birthday, 26th of March of 2019, as a gift that we were kind of giving to the city, putting people to work for the betterment of the future of the city. One of the key issues was to sit down and listen to every one of those 77 institutions and understand how they would see innovation and how we could bring together challenges that would be meaningful for each one of them, even if they had very different views of the city, and because they were clubs of football, the health sector, public sectors, the legal sector, some of the innovators. We had a very comprehensive city table. And these are the challenges that were kind of clustered from the opinions of every one of the institutions. Education and talent development, the only issue that was cited by all the 77 institutions while we were talking and sitting down with them. City branding, how we can show Porto Alegre in the world. Urban renewal and improvement, Professor Piquet always talks about how important it is to have a city that is attractive to talent. If talent is the fuel for innovation, we need to have cities that are attracted to talent, because talent is very movable and can go away if we do not have an interesting city with good wine, good coffee, good cultural life. The quality of life, and then we understood that the pact would have to go beyond innovation and talk about how we can build a better city, modernization of city administration, and the business environments to foster entrepreneurship innovation. During COVID times, Pacto was also responsible to create collective projects to kind of face the hardships that we were having in the city at the moment. From the approval of the challenges, we created very agile project design sprints to create the first cohort of projects that would advance one of these challenges. And we had hundreds of participants, representatives from the city table entities, but also volunteers from all other sectors of the city that went to open quick design sprints where we would have a tempest of ideas and define proposals that would be submitted to the city table, where presidents or vice presidents of the most important institutions would commit to advance those projects. We had 24 proposals in the first cycle, or all of them were approved with more than 80%. And we went to create the project charts. Each project of these 24 was related to one of more city challenges. It had a long-term view, but it had first results in 6 months, otherwise it wouldn't be approved. The idea of being pragmatic, to have the long-term view, but quick wins, it's very important to make sure that the movement has enough energy to follow up and build up. The idea was in the sense that no project could demand human resources or other physical resources that were not already available in the institutions of the city, and we would have governance that would depend case by case, because each project would have a different set of players that would be involved. Sometimes the public sector, sometimes the private sector, sometimes one of the innovators of the city, or a social organization. Of course, we used a lot of the energy that was already in Porto Alegre, and that was made of the participatory budget. Porto Alegre was the first city to have a participatory budget, and we built this collective idea into the participatory city building that was being proposed by Pacto Alegre. Today, Pacto Alegre has almost 5 years, and it's a key platform of collaboration that's helping rekindle self-esteem and foster high-impact transformation projects that are placing Porto Alegre as one of the hotspots of innovation in Latin America. Some results that we could share with you. One of the projects of the Pact was the creation of a very large innovation hub that was mixing old GDP companies with new innovators, and it has grown since 2021 to connections of more than 700 startups, a community of more than 5,000 people, more than 450 linked companies, and is the fastest growing innovation hub in Latin America. It put together a campus, and it's bringing learning experiences out of class to more than 5,000 students. It's really something that's being visited by all administrations in Brazil, and all of them want to bring a caldeira to their own cities. Another project kind of enrolled all the players to make sure that we would put Porto Alegre as one of the educating cities. So we brought together players from the private and the public sector with a lot of policies that went to all places in the city, including the idea of having mayors for each square in the city, and to make innovation Olympics with students from lower education, to make sure that we would embed in them a sense of citizenship and a protagonism citizenship. Another project that's very important, and it kind of goes hand in hand with Instituto Caldeira, is the Territories of Innovation. And I was hearing Anna talking about the importance of social innovation. We have a lot of vulnerable communities and irregular settlements in Brazil, and sometimes innovation is accused of being a bubble, and that is more for the medium and upper classes. And we were very worried that Pacto Alegre would have a way of connecting with these vulnerable communities. So we started this project that's called Territories of Innovations, that has the idea of creating community hubs for innovation and local development, the childs, where some local social actors that are already related to innovation are mapped and helped to so they become a kind of ambassador of public policies, of entrepreneur policies that are being offered by the government in communities. So that was very important, and we are illuminating with free Wi-Fi access each one of these places, and we are investing into providing good installations, because sometimes people in this community say that they have to go down into the city. The idea that they are not part of the city is something that we have to break up, and this is part of the effort that we are doing together. This is the methodology that we are creating for these innovation hubs, to map local social actors, to provide support to improve facilities, to install free rapid Wi-Fi connection, to engage universities to train and help governance of these places, to establish them as community hubs, as ambassadors of the cities in the communities, to connect with public services and entrepreneur support services, to engage local population, circle talks, co-creation, to map with the community vocation and aspirations that they have in a way that we develop a local development plan supported by public policy, but very well related with the ideas and the local entrepreneurs. And also, we had an effort to kind of understand these people before designing policies for them, you know. And so we together with some other players, we started a survey of the entrepreneurship in communities with more than 1,000 interviews. It's a major report we can share if anyone has interest. It has very good insights on how we can and the needs of these kinds of things. And some of the needs I kind of summarized in here: internet access, because a lot of people have cell phones, but few of them have data plans that allow them to have real access to the public services or online courses or other things. Pricing practices, a lot of them have kind of budding businesses, but they lack skills to define prices. And sometimes they are losing money selling products, space to work, skill development, business management support. So we are kind of using the local innovation hubs, the community innovation hubs, to kind of offer support for these needs that were mapped during this survey here. We are also looking into making Porto Alegre one of the friendliest cities for startups in Latin America. We have the most active living lab in Brazil. More than 60 startups are testing solutions in the city. And we have special calls to foster food tax, good tax, gov tax, and culture tax. 1 minute and I will finish on don't worry. Our government is also working to improve the business environment. And we have even some tributary incentives for this kind of things. That's placed in Porto Alegre in one of the 15, around the 15th position in terms of the best places for startups in Latin America. And we are rising a lot of other rankings also, including the Nomads digital rankings. Porto Alegre has become one of the destinations chosen by digital nomads because of these kind of things. That has brought South Summit, one of the major innovation events in Brazil. And the 4th District Innovation District is now part of the IASP, Global Innovation District Alliance, because we were able to connect with this kind of things. Because we believe in connections, we have joined with Caxias do Sul, Joinville, Florianópolis, and Curitiba to build a regional cluster in this idea, this fractal idea that you have to have alliances from different sizes, so we have more capacity to engage in collaboration with other clusters. And the learning outcomes, and that's the end, the 10 insights that I can share with you. Make sure to enroll the leadership of key institutions of the local ecosystem. Borrow legitimacy from ecosystem heroes and mentors to jumpstart the movement. You need the legitimacy of people that are really giving themselves to the movement, so the movement can start with a lot of traction. Listen before building proposals. Foster citizen and institutional engagement as city builders. Invite people to be real protagonists in the building of the better city. Celebrate and reward collaborative behavior. That's very important to make sure that people behave on the logic of abundance. Think big, but act quickly. You have long-term goals, but you need quick wins. Be always aware of the challenge of communication. That was always the misstep that we had, to communicate what we are doing. Do not dismiss opportunities, even if they are not on your plans. Build the narrative and use the power of symbolism. It's not by sorts that we chose the birthday of the city to make sure that we started Porto Alegre. And in the end, we are talking about mindset change. That is the greatest challenge, to make sure that cities are enable themselves to be relevant in this new economy. And if possible, have an innovation musician on your team. Jose Piquet was really quite an important guy for us. It's a pleasure to share a little bit, and if you need any more information, I will be happy to
Thank you
provide.
so much. Thank you so much for your great presentation. We are a shortage of time, but just I need to show all. It's part of the innovation. You see it? Yes. This is also for creativity, mindset, entrepreneurial mindset. We're running this one. Okay. Great, thanks from Parazil. And really, we are a shortage of time. Now, the next, I think Arno, Dr. Arno, again, and you have a next session, right?
Yes. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah.
Yes, I have the next session. Yes, I will go ahead and start with that.
Russia is there, and Muhsin have social unforeseen activity for social emergency.
Okay.
He apologized. This guy, it's one of the leading inventor in the GCC and in the MENA. He have many registered GCC. He received several medals, several appreciation through the world. And really, we need to be part of our conference, but unfortunately, he have problems with emergency for the family, which lead to miss our conference.